You're listening to the Online Business Blueprint. I'm John Stange. It's great to have you with us. As always, we're brought to you by platformlaunchers.com. If you want to build, grow, and monetize your online platform, that's where you go. That's where we've got our community. That's where we've got our resources. We've got our blog. We've got our podcast, all that stuff. You find it at platformlaunchers.com. And we want to help you build, grow, and monetize your online platform. We want to help you take your passion, turn it into a platform so that you can earn a paycheck. And from time to time, we have the opportunity and the real privilege to be able to bring guest experts who have really tried out all sorts of ideas with their online businesses and have succeeded at a high level. And we get really excited about that. And this week, we have someone that I'm super excited to be able to introduce to you, because this is someone that I don't just know a little bit. This is someone that over the past few years, I've had the real, genuine privilege to get to know, not just as someone who creates content, not just someone that I meet in passing at conferences and stuff like that, but this is a true friend. B. Andreen. B, welcome to the Online Business Blueprint. So glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm super excited to have you here because I know you've got a lot of wisdom and you've done some bold things and some brave things with your online platform. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on here is because I've literally watched you step out in faith and succeed at a high level, a level that I think sometimes people don't necessarily believe is possible for them. And I'm sure you went through a season where maybe you wondered if that was the case for you, but now you've succeeded. And so, just for starters, could you give our listeners an opportunity to just hear an overview of the online business empire that you have created?
Oh my goodness, yes. So where this all started was I had a really great 9 to 5. Just that good job. I had great autonomy. I was a single mom, and I was praying with a girlfriend at the time. I was a brand new Christian, really just seeking the Lord in my life and trying to create relationship with Him. And at the end of this prayer, she said, "I just saw the Lord hand you a sparkly microphone." And I reduced to tears. It was not an exciting moment for her. She was like clapping and she thought it was a really beautiful vision that she had had. And so I went on to tell her that I have debilitating stage fright. And that's like my worst case scenario would be having to stand anywhere and hold a microphone, which you guys probably can see my podcast mic is sparkly. Um, so this really was the beginning of an obedience journey with the Lord. And I really became a believer through this process. And I kind of joke like, I don't know that I knew what the sparkly mic was about. So I just went for it. I was like, well, clearly I have something to say. I have a message to share. I did not have all of the components of my faith to go to the Lord and say, okay, what is it that you want me to do? But something really sweet happened in the process. I started a podcast called Tear Out the Tags. And it was really about removing the negative labels that hold us back. Essentially, what I was talking about was insecurities. There's some irony in my story because where I grew up in the area of the country where I lived at the time is very high competitive, very business savvy environment. I was surrounded by really dogmatic leaders and like really running toe to toe with people that I'm quite literally not wired to go toe to toe with. And so I had really become like emotionally suppressed and really like high resiliency, but not necessarily in tune or in alignment with what I knew my heart wanted to be doing. And so through producing the podcast, I just began really truth telling, like the pieces of my life that were out of alignment and some of those insecurities that I had, tucked in and pretended like didn't exist. And in that really found my voice. And that led to, what we're going to be discussing today, which is a lot more opportunities that I was able to jump into and learn about. And so that was kind of the heart of this entrepreneurial journey. Just to cover kind of John's fear, I'll just say the fear piece, right? The like, I thought that only super special people could accomplish the multiple income streams or semi-passive or passive income streams. And so I really dealt with like, I'm a single mom. Is this responsible for me to be trying to do these other things? But part of my story was I could never make enough money because of a hardship that I was going through at the time. And so I kind of had a need to create extra income streams to be able to make ends meet. So, but I definitely faced the fear, and I joke like I did everything wrong. So you guys get all the lessons of everything wrong because I'm definitely an expert in that. So.
A lesson in doing everything wrong and yet somehow look at the success that you've enjoyed. Well, people that are listening to us right now are, I'm sure, very curious about the nature of your platform and your vision for your platform. So let's just start there. Explain the basics of your platform, and then we'll take this a piece at a time and dissect how this really got going and the levels of success that you've enjoyed as your platform's developed.
Yeah, definitely. So this, I think, is a really important piece of my story, because I had this message, and it was just passionate to my core. My really heartbeat of the message was, I really noticed, especially in the business worlds that I was a part of, that the quietest or the kindest or the like most subdued people were the ones that were kind of like not getting to the top of the leadership rungs. And I was certainly in that boat alongside in my business journey. And so I really started as like I wanted to be able to help people who were dealing with these insecurities, who were dealing with these limiting blocks, and be able to get them past those so that they could just slam dunk, their business. And I don't know if she's still here, Velma. Velma is somebody who she's so dynamic at what she does, and she just glistens when she talks about what she does. And yet, before she gets to do what she does, there's this sales piece, right? Of having to like close a client. And that's a very different relationship. It's a very different approach at times when we were doing our business. And so that was really kind of my heart in this was like I wanted to be able to untap people and get them to do things that they wouldn't normally do. And what I found is that I ran into a whole lot of trauma. So turns out you can't talk about insecurities without bumping into some of those really difficult life things that we've been through. And we call them like big T traumas would be like car accidents or a move that you didn't want to do as a kid, or maybe, loss of a family member, right? But then we have all these little T traumas. And so I started realizing I have to find other ways to help people through these emotional traumas. And they can be things like we had a bad English teacher when we were in the third grade. And so we know we really need to become a writer, but this teacher taught us something that we really, you know, now don't believe in ourselves around. So my platform has really kind of developed and changed a lot through the course of the last 5 years. But um, so now I would say I have kind of different arms of my platform now. One of them, and probably the most successful, is I'm a business coach for highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And so that is not the same as emotional, just so you guys know. High sensitivity is really where we have really unique skill sets that are supercharged. So they would be like super strengths, and then they cause weaknesses in other areas. One of mine is people. So I'm super connection oriented, and I lose a lot of my time and energy if I'm not careful and I don't have boundaries around my time. I'm also a little bit too tenderhearted around like unwanted feedback, which
Hmm.
you can probably tie that together with my initial message. So,
All right. So you're helping entrepreneurs that you would say are highly sensitive entrepreneurs,
mhm.
and you're helping them get to the finish line. You're helping them figure out things that they can do that help them succeed in life, succeed in faith, succeed in business. All of these things, all valuable things. Which components of an online platform are you presently utilizing? So, I mean, those that are involved in platform launchers see I've got a blog, I've got podcasts, I've got courses, I've got a membership community, different things like that. Which aspects of an online platform are you presently and primarily utilizing?
So this is something that's really important to me. And this came from John gave me one of the best compliments I've ever received in my life. And it was shortly after he started Platform Launchers. I really recognized that I wasn't so much starting a business as I was a platform, and starting to learn the differences was really just helpful for me. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial home. I always say I'm an adult child of highly driven and successful people, right? They're like the boomer, typical boomer, like competitive. My family is very multifaceted. And so I felt like when I came into the online space, there was all this pressure around like business. Like I remember being in a really high competitive business community and they would be like, "Well, what's the business? What's the business? What's the business?" And I at that point, I just really wanted to share my heart and my story and some of the content that I had created. And so meeting John and been coming into this community made me realize that there the framework of what would become the business was very different than what I had initially learned. And in that, learning from John, one day, I think we were on the phone and he called me supremely coachable. And it was one of the sweetest gifts. Just like you guys, I do labels, right? So it was such a wonderful label to receive from him. And it really was a testimony to how I really just dove in and wanted to learn and wanted to do things the right way. And so, one of the things that became very clear to me from a difficult situation that I went through in a past business group was that I really wanted to make sure that whatever I did platform wise didn't need to be funded, that all of my income comes from other sources because I deal with people who do have trauma and I deal with clients who tend to take a little bit longer to succeed. So it was really important to me to have those other income streams be what provides for my household. And then what comes from the platform is just a bonus. And that really came from being in this industry long enough and seeing that there are some people who are really just gobbling up money and trying to kind of create as quick success as they can and aren't necessarily aware of the people involved that they might be not serving well or not taking the time to see that they have other struggles. So, to answer your question, I went to one of John's retreats. It was the $250 a day. I think you were just developing it.
Hmm.
And we had a retreat here in North Carolina, which I actually live here now. It was like such a cool start to a neat journey in my life. But I came here for the first time and it was for John's retreat. And I realized a couple of things at that retreat. One was there was a particular amount of money, it was around $1,000 that had become an emotional block for me. And I felt that I had experienced an injustice. And so I was really like stuck. And I don't know if you guys have ever been like that, where you just like can't make ends meet on a certain way. But there was this one piece of my life that I like couldn't I couldn't let go of the circumstances around this. And when I went to John's retreat, I came home realizing, oh, I already am making enough passive income to cover that $1,000. And for whatever reason, that took off like the pressure valve for me, going, oh, I've already replaced this income. I don't need to worry so much about this, like, and it was sweet the way that John taught about, and hopefully some of you guys, I'm sure, have taken his course. But it was just really sweet for me to come home and go, gosh, I've been beating myself up over this one thing, and I've already slam dunked this goal. Like, and it just made everything easier when I came home. Another thing that I realized when I was at that retreat is that I have a harder time selling something that my heart is tied to.
Mm.
Like other things are not, they just, that I don't know, I don't have a hard time selling like popsicles or whatever. But I really realized I needed more reps of selling things. And so I actually came home from the retreat and I started doing balloon animals. And I noticed that it was similar in that I had to be kind of vulnerable and you know it, I adults would chuckle at me and kind of laugh at me, which hit my kind of not wanting that negative feedback. I had a couple of like kids that would go pop their balloon and they'd come back and go, make me another one, clown, like just
Oh,
this like
gosh.
really funny interactions with people. But I noticed that I could make about $1,000 a month, sometimes two, just by doing balloon animals around town. And it really taught me a lot about like the selling piece and putting boundaries around my time. So
Mhm.
that's kind of a silly part of my story, but it really kickstarted for me, like putting more irons into more fires. So then after that, this is like we now have 13, I guess technically 14 income streams. Um, and of the platform pieces, I have an online community, I have several podcasts,
Mhm.
um, and I'm trying to think, I have two books and
Coaching
yeah,
is part of it.
coaching. Yeah. I have four different coaching programs as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's
And,
it.
um, and you've also, one of the things that you really got my attention with was when you told me that you've also been blessed with sponsorship income over the
Hmm.
course of, the past group of years. So that's really 5 things,
Yeah.
which is really neat. So, like, 5 different consistent sources of income that have come from your online platform.
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting how like they're layered, right? So many lead into each other. I know a lot of you guys have experienced that. It's also shown me that there are things that people are asking for that I do know how to do.
Mhm.
So I charge for like bios and one pages and things like that as well.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, right now I'm certain there's somebody listening that is just wrestling with this idea of desiring to help people and be genuinely helpful, right? Which is where your heart is at as well. And they're wondering, how do we put this all together? Could you tell people just how you put that all together, what your strategy was once it became very clear, once you had an understanding of who you were going to help, how did you put your strategy together of building this platform?
So I launched a business community about a year and a half ago, and I really was inspired by John and what he does here with you guys. I struggled a lot being a single mom, just with I have a crazy schedule. There's always something going on. I call myself a self-supporting single mom. I'm now married. I have a wonderful partner and lots of support now, but I didn't when I was building all of this.
Mhm.
And I really struggled with the consistency piece if I was just showing up and doing something on my own because I I'm not wired like John, guys. I'm like nope, sorry, I'm not doing it today.
The world is grateful, B, that you are not wired like me. The world has enough of me. It needs you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I did find a ton of value in showing up for a community. So
Mhm.
that was the piece when I launched the business community. It did several things for me. One, it gave me a place to show up consistently and record that content, but
Mhm.
it also gave me an opportunity to learn more of what the problems were, which really helped me refine my target audience and who I was really helping.
Mhm.
I am someone who gets along with just about anybody. So
Mhm.
when I started this, my thought was like, I'm going to help everybody. I just really lived in that zone of like, I'm not going to niche down. And so that has been kind of an interesting process for me where the platform actually helped me to niche down into that highly sensitive entrepreneur lane. And then I found a group of mental health practitioners that were really struggling with not understanding what they were doing around business. They were faith based, and a lot of them don't even like the word business,
Mhm.
which was quite awesome because I do the labels thing. So I understood where they were coming from with not wanting to necessarily be in business, but they weren't necessarily in ministry. And so that was a group of people that I was able to serve through the content that I was creating. So,
Nice. Now, along the journey here, you have been blessed with successes. You've also been blessed with challenges.
mhm.
And I'd love to give some space for you to share about each of those. So let's start with the successes as you've built your online platform. Tell us about some of the moments that you would say, all right, this right here, this was a real win.
Blessed with challenges is I am just now getting to a point where I can hear that and actually smile. So I'm actually going to share with you guys. I went through a really difficult ordeal, and I was told to document every detail of what would come after that challenge. And so I did. for almost a decade, collected data, like to try to help myself through this difficult season. And in 2023, I think, 2023, I accidentally deleted all of this evidence that I had collected. So I
Mm.
changed my email address. I took all of those Google files. If anyone's ever experienced this, you'll be laughing because Google is funny this way. So I pointed all of those files to my new email address, and then I deleted my old email address, not realizing that these were parented over in this other email address. And I was like in a little bit of shock that I had lost like literally mountains and mountains and mountains of information. And in that process, I kind of went into this, like, I guess it was a little bit like post traumatic stress of like, what am I going to do? How am I going to recover all of this? And so I went into just trying to organize the files that I had to see if any of the information was still on like my computer. And I cleaned my whole desktop up. And at the very end of that process, I had this children's book. It was a little poem that I'd written my kids for Christmas. And we were in my children are in a divorce situation. And so it was my way of comforting them when they would go between their dads and I in my house on Christmas. And so that was my first publishing experience where Jody was a big part of this actually, where from concept to publishing, it was 7 weeks and we put it out in time for Christmas. And that has really actually been the Lord's like wonderful justice that he's brought in my story has been like the more I've let go of the past and some of these things that I felt like I had to hang on to so tightly, he's given me these sweet gifts
Mm.
of being able to say some things that I've never been able to say. So,
So, all right. So, one obvious success coming out of the challenges was
mhm.
publishing your first book. Getting
Yep.
your book out there and helping other families dealing with similar situations that you've been wrestling with as a family. And now
Hmm.
you have the privilege of putting your ideas into words, putting it out as a book. And now at Christmas time, other families have the opportunity to just be blessed by the wisdom that you've shared there. All right, what's another
Yeah.
success? Something else that's worked well for you in this online platform space?
I want to share with you guys the sponsorship piece
Mhm,
because I started a podcast for an organization called the Splankna Institute,
mhm,
and they're in a faith-based inner healing modality. They're actually what helped me kind of bring those trauma informed pieces to my business and my coaching. And so I actually launched a podcast for them about a year and a half ago. And it was really a great lesson for me in seeing how there are these companies that need long form marketing. They need some of these tools that I knew how to provide services
mhm.
for. And so they were sponsoring us very generously for creating that podcast. They still are. In fact, I just left the podcast with my co-host, but I really have started learning that there are ways to create sponsorship opportunities before your
Mhm,
show is really large. We did have really healthy downloads. We had on average about 450 to 750 downloads per episode, and
mhm.
that was about a year in. So we had really healthy downloads, or I think that's healthy downloads
It is
from
healthy. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's
starting. Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. And then another on my original podcast, I had a few friends who had businesses in the areas where my podcast was being downloaded more often. And I was not that brave about asking for sponsorships yet. And so after I attended John's event, I just asked those friends, like, hey, would you be willing to sponsor my podcast? And we would tell the audience about your business. And I was shocked that these business owner friends were like, yeah, how much do you want? And so I got like $200 from one and 150 from another and about 50 from another. And it just was like an extra blessing to help me produce that content for a season. So I think sometimes we can be a little bit nervous or afraid to ask for support of our community, local businesses, things like that. Our church would be Sometimes if you're producing faith-based content, you can actually get like ministry support from your local church as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. That's wonderful, and I know that, again, oftentimes people, when they're creating faith-based content, one of the struggles people often have is, whether it be talking about it through a business lens or even this idea of financial support that comes from, the faith-based content, but I always tell people, and I think they understand my heart with this, that if possible, I would like them to make an income from the content they're creating for a couple reasons. One, it costs money to host websites and buy microphones and all of that. You're going to have expenses. You're going to have to update computer equipment. I mean, some of my most expensive things that I have throughout the course of a year, any given week, any given month, relate to the online content that I'm creating. And so having income sources related to that, to pay for hosting, to pay for tools, to pay for services, anything like that, it's very helpful. But then the other thing is, if you can dedicate more time toward the content you're creating because you have income sources that are connected to it, right? That means you're going to be able to create more content because you have more time that you're able to dedicate toward it because you're earning an income from it. And so because I desire good, solid, edifying content to be created, I truly hope when possible, if it can be ethically done, which it often can, I love when I hear people actually earning an income from the content they're creating. They're dedicating their time to it, and it definitely helps in the process of it getting out there. So when you told me that you had these different income sources that were genuinely starting to work for what you were doing, and I was watching all of this succeed, first of all, I was just very excited for you just as a friend, but also I thought it's a fantastic case study in stepping out in faith because I know that at an earlier season of life, you had the desire to help people this way. But I
Mhm.
also can remember a season where you were wondering, will this ever work for you? And to watch you go from wondering that to experiencing that, that was a wonderful thing to be able to observe. And I imagine that that has to be a great pick me up for you as well.
Yeah, it's I recently have been saying that I always wanted to build a life with a view. Um, I think that for me, the entrepreneurial journey was about security and safety and being able to have my own, my own income to be able to protect my family and to be able to provide for my family. And we just recently moved onto Lake Norman. We have our boat outside has a little parking spot, and it's just this really sweet realization that all of that hard work does lead to those green pastures. And I think that most entrepreneurs quit in the middle. I think it's really hard to pour in and do all of these things and not feel defeated at times that you're not quite where you want to be. And I was certainly one of those people that I was comparing my entrepreneurial success to my former success. And so that bar felt really high, and I had to really reset those expectations. But another thing that John has taught me, which sounds silly, when I switched over to the online platform, I felt like I had to make all of my income from that. And John really reminded me that I know how to make income in other areas. And so like we invest in real estate, and we have like that just is an area that's very lucrative for us. And so being able to do some of those things, just like the balloon animals, it brings joy and it's less pressure and it adds income and it allows me to be able to do the things that I want to do without that pressure of having to produce the income, which really helped me a ton. And I don't know, like I said, I'm a highly sensitive entrepreneur. So I think part of that was just like, I wanted to make sure that my heart wasn't dependent on the income for what I was doing and what I was putting out. But I think everyone's different in that way, obviously.
Totally logical. B, this has been fantastic to have you share your heart and some of these things that you've been building and some of the things that you've been doing. I know that once we finish up our call here, our group is going to have the opportunity to ask you some Q&A. But for those that are either watching us via YouTube or listening to us via the podcast, do you have, I guess, two requests as we kind of wind this part down? Do you have any final words of wisdom for anyone who's really thinking about building an online platform? And then finally, um, just let people know where they can find your content and how best to get in touch with you.
Yeah. I do have a story I want to share with you guys. As you're on your entrepreneurial journey, you will need to watch out for what Brene Brown calls candle blower outers. So sometimes when you start to win, and sometimes when you start to achieve these successes, whether it be monetary or downloads, or you get stage opportunities or whatever that may be, you sometimes run into these candle blower outers. And I had a lot of those around me when I started my journey. And so, something I want to share with you guys is how we can miss over our greatest gifts and how special it is when we rediscover those gifts. So, recently I was sharing with a girlfriend that I was a gymnastics student at a gymnastics facility when I was 14, and I was recruited to be a gymnastics coach. I was the only coach that was under the age of 18 at that time. And they really recognized in me this responsibility to be able to come in and teach children's gymnastics. And I didn't realize it until many, many years later how big of a deal this was that they really recruited me and started training me. So by the time I was 16, I was running our entire men's gymnastics program. I had two male gymnastics coaches that I was in charge of who were older than me. So one went to my high school, he was 18, and then another one was about 10 years older than me. He was about 26. The gentleman who was 18 was a great friend of mine. And I was the high five coach. That was like what I was known for. So you did not leave the gym at the end of one of my classes without giving me a high five. And Ben was the 18-year-old co-coach. He was my peer. Um, he would always jump at the end of my line and he would like make fun of my high five thing.
Mhm.
So he would, and it was fun. It was pretty lighthearted, no big deal. And so he would get at the end of every one of my lines and go, hi, high five, and kind of tease me. And it really was kind of not a big deal until he worked for our high school's yearbook committee at school. And so he started digging up photos of me from like cheerleading things because I was a cheerleader at school. And he started making these posters and putting them all around the gym. And they would say things about my high fives. And they were, kind of making fun of me. And I remember when they started popping up, my spirit started hiding. I started shrinking. I started getting kind of embarrassed, and just tried to laugh it off. I was 16 years old, and then they started showing up at my high school, and it felt like it went too far. And I remember feeling like nobody stopped it and nobody knew what to do to help me. But I also didn't know how to all of a sudden say like, "Hey, I have a problem with this." And I think that for I just let's see, I'm 39 in a month, but still to this day, I'm uncovering those little moments where God made me this incredible encourager. And I am a high five coach. Like that's what I get to do is I get to like encourage people and high five them and like you're slam dunking this through life and through their business journey. So I'm sharing that with you guys because each and every one of us has these gifts that we've had candle blower outers come and suppress and try to snuff off. And
Mhm.
so as you bring those back to life, for me, that has been the greatest gift for not only myself and my family, but I believe for the Lord, the way that He created us to be. And there's something really special about that as well. But I have noticed that the more success you gain, you do have to watch out for those candle blower outers. So that's my end note. And then you guys can get in touch with me. My email's b@emboldenlabel.com, and emboldenlabel.com is my website. So that's how you can get in touch with me.
Love that. B at emboldenlabel.com, spelled BEE at emboldenlabel.com. B.
You got it.
Andreen, it is so fantastic to have had you as a guest expert for the Online Business Blueprint. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Really, really found your story fascinating and edifying, and we're really grateful for all that the Lord's doing in and through you during this season of your journey.
Thanks. Thank you.